Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
Hey everyone, it's Wendy K Laidlaw here, and as always, I hope that this finds you well. Today I wanted to talk about a particularly sensitive element, I guess, but it's really like the sight of your sacred self. There's so many people have this awareness about there's something bigger and more meaningful out there, but very few people looking internally, they're looking externally. And of course, that is the conundrum and the oxymoron, ironically. When any form of dis-ease or dysfunction has shown up in our body or in our emotions, in our feelings, and life in itself it almost feels like it's falling down round our ears, that's when I believe it's an opportunity to really examine yourself from a very kind and compassionate perspective, but to really look inward as to kind of what's at discord, what is the dysfunction, what is unaligned to who we are at our core. And this is where really starting the journey, or not starting, but continuing the journey into your sacred self, your sensitive self, which is really the essence of who you were born to be, can be pretty challenging, because at the core of who you are is hidden under layers and shells and armory of not only what life taught you that was dysfunction, because, and what I mean by dysfunction is you could be brought up in an environment where you're told how to behave by your caregivers or your parents, yet they behave the opposite to what they suggest. So that creates sort of crazy making kind of feelings inside your body, where you're, even at a young age. I was watching a young boy, he must have been about 5 years old, very sharp, very switched on, having a conversation with his father. And he was very clearly questioning and challenging his father, but his father just kept saying, well, just shut up, just do as you're told. But the wee boy was actually asking for clarity, because there was a discord between what the father had said and what the father was doing, or what the father had asked the wee boy to do, but yet wasn't doing it himself. And it was really interesting to observe, what message then would that little boy take in and on, not only about that sort of situation, but also about himself. Would he end up disowning those parts of himself that were dared to question, what was happening? And this is what tends to happen to so many people. And I always like to sort of reiterate, we're never here to bash anybody's parents, because they're just a byproduct of their own upbringing and dysfunction or trauma or whatever has gone on in the past. But what I believe has shown up in your body as endometriosis is because you're breaking the ancestral line. So whereas they would have put their own sense of self down into the deep down into their core, to be switched off, locked away, never to be opened again. As part of this journey, you're tapping into, not even tapping, you're slowly turning the key in the door to what lies within. And that can feel, because you may have had, like that little boy example, being told to just be quiet and get on with it, you end up switching off parts of yourself because it's too painful for some people for that to remain open. That's where I believe suppression of all those feelings and these questions leads to depression. And also, naturally, if you, again, observe young children anywhere between the ages of 5 and 8, they've got a great sense of what's right and wrong. They've got a great sense of injustice. They're very comfortable with who they are. And that is there within you, but they will have been conditioned and by their parents, by society, by their teachers to conform and be a lesser version of themselves for societal norms. And equally, it goes beyond that. I mean, observing this father with his son, the father was totally absorbed in his phone, shoving this PlayStation, whatever, into his son's face. He's only 5 years old, and not interested in him, not giving the attention. Clearly, this wee boy was wanting his father's attention. And again, it kind of evokes in me, as I say, I'm never here to shame anybody, and he might have his own, the father might have his own reasons for doing so, and I'm not really here to analyze that. But from observing that interaction, as I say, I come back to, what is that little boy learning? What is he being taught? Because you're here today because of what you internalized, the messages and the conditioning and the teachings that you got, and ultimately the core. You just look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we need to feel like safe and secure. Obviously, we want that love and attention, and we by the age of 10, I think it was the psychologist Alfred Adler says that we have made up a view of the world that by age of 10 of how the world is. So this is what we're doing. We're literally trying to kind of gently turn the key as to kind of what little you has interpreted the world to be. And then they say by the age of 20, we fervently defend our view of the world and don't seek to change it. But then ironically, when life shows up in through your body or through your relationships or through your work, where you feel dissatisfied and you feel down and depressed, that is the opportunity to really gently and lovingly question what has been internalized at age 10 and at age 20 in your views of the world. And I think this is where, when we start to kind of look at the views of the world and we start to think, well, who am I? What do I think? What do I feel? What is my purpose? Do I even have a purpose? How do I feel safe? Because again, at the very core of who we are as humans, we want to feel safe and we want to feel loved and nurtured and fed, all those very, very basic human needs. But how many people, how many women in particular, are slink off into the shadows because they've been shamed about who they are. They're not allowed to speak up or have an opinion without being criticized or chastised. So these are the kind of things that when we start to look at the sense of who you are. So even if you think about when you were super young, you know, you didn't have to be taught how to be. You just were. You didn't have to be taught how to play. You just played. You didn't have to think about questioning. You just questioned. But then over time, that got the repeated messages back to you was, well, you're not supposed to play. That's irresponsible. You're older now. You're supposed to do this, this, and this. You're not supposed to be that sensitive. You're not supposed to ask questions. So again, this is what you're slowly unpacking. And of course, you're going to come across all sorts of different emotions when you do so. Again, children don't have any issues throwing a tantrum or feeling angry or upset. Obviously, they're conditioned to learn as to what's socially, in inverted commas, acceptable and what's not. But how much of that has been internalized, especially for women with, as I mentioned in my other podcast, the rise of the rage room. It's interesting to kind of notice, you know, how much suppressed emotions can come bursting out in other ways. And equally, if that sense of self is associated to you know, unpleasant emotions, then that just again further erodes and corrodes away the sense of identity. So this is ultimately what we're looking to do, is get clear on who we are. I know on my journey, I was like, I don't know what I think, I don't know what I feel, because I'd been so bludgeoned down by toxic relationships that I just wanted them to be happy. I just wanted, in fact, I could anticipate what they needed ahead of them needing it. That's how sensitive and perceptive I was. I had made it, I was proud of the fact that I knew what people wanted and I knew what they thought and I knew what they felt, to the point of obviously abject sickness, illness, and burnout. And so this is when we start to unpack, and I say unpack, you know, of what's been projected onto us, it can feel like a grieving process. It can feel like a sense of, you know, injustice, because again, children have a great sense of injustice, like, why me? Why did this happen? Why didn't I have that parent be interested in me rather than their phone? And of course, nowadays, there's even more distractions. There's even more pressures upon parents and people to you've got these. I didn't even know this till recently, that there's these apps that, you know, can suck in your stomach and build out your bottom and whatever else. I didn't even know these things existed. So I'm still kind of like, wow, how is this going to manifest itself and affect this next generation coming up? So what messages are the young girls being taught? Again, I watched another young girl completely absorbed and obsessed into her phone. You just have to watch the what's the name? It's escaped me at the moment, but there's a fantastic documentary on Netflix about the increased numbers of girls being hospitalized, being depressed, self-harming because of, you know, the intrinsic messaging that they're getting about who they should be, not who they are, but who they should be. And you know, you see groups of girls and they're like little clones of each other, which of course is an element of mirroring that happens when you're around your peers and things. But I'm always concerned, like, well, what is that doing to that young girl who's going to become a woman, that her sense of identity and her sense of self? Because if she's so removed from that sensitive, sacred self, you know, she's always had to build up all these defenses to be online, to be visible, to be seen. I think that's what it's called. It's called the social dilemma. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's quite staggering as to the impacts. The people that develop those apps and develop those software ban their own children until the age of 14 to be engaged in them. That's how damaging it is. So we didn't have that perhaps growing up, but what we did have was, again, societal conditioning and projection. But I hope you can even see by watching a film like that, the impact that it has on so many different levels. And so when we're looking to connect to the sense of who we are at our core, it might, if it's been projected upon that there's something wrong with us at our core, then naturally there's going to be this push-pull thing that's going to be going on, where you're going to have this inner voice, this wisdom, where I refer to as your soul, your spirit, saying, because they say our ego wants us to stay stuck and our soul wants us to grow. Our soul is always, you know, helping us to evolve and move forward. And you'll know this when you just, you know, you feel this calling, you feel this pulling that you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be doing something bigger and better in your life. But yet you're thinking, well, who would I be without this relationship? Who would I be without this job? Who would I be without this, these material things? And ironically, you know, we're obviously born with nothing and we leave with nothing. But what we have in between can be everything that we actually sought in our lives, which is that sense of peace and tranquility by just pure connection to yourself. But most people don't even know who they are through the vast majority of their life. So this is where it's so important to kind of journal as you wake up every single morning, because you're tapping into those parts of your brain that haven't put up the shell and the walls yet to face the world. You're allowing those deepest yearnings that are deep down in your heart and in your soul to come to light, and not only come to light, but allow to process very, very respectfully, very gently, very carefully, any fears or anxiety that might come up surrounding that. I know that I think I may have shared this story, but when I put the condition in remission pretty early on, I still had mitochondrial dysfunction and chronic fatigue and things like that. But I thought, right, okay, well, I'm ready to go back to work. I had my own business in property and real estate. I had to wind it up for a number of different reasons because obviously I was ill and there was nobody, you know, equipped enough to keep my business going. But I decided this day that I was going to go back to that. I thought, well, that's the easiest thing to do. Then I can start making some money again. And then I can, now this work, this job, my business did not fulfill me. I tried to put my the sense of myself and caring and really wanting to offer tremendous value to people in the job, but it was misplaced. It was all going into the wrong people and the wrong environment, and the people around about that I worked with were quite toxic. And I remember specifically having that thought, and then seconds later falling down metal stairs that led down into my back garden and breaking 3 ribs and damaging my spleen. If ever there was a message that I was not to go back the way I was to move forward, there it was. And for me, I took that as a sign, because I believe that life is always giving us lessons. There's going to be all sorts of things happening in your life as you move forward. And I think there's almost this transitory stage in your life where you really reach an age and stage where you're starting to really look at things in a different manner, in a different way, because you have this new knowledge. You have pain in your body, or the relationship is not what you thought it was, or the work wasn't what you thought it was, or you're waking up dreading what your day is going to bring. So it's these kind of moments that really allow you to sit up and pay attention as to kind of what's going on inside. And for me, it was the broken ribs and the damaged spleen that was like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to go back the way. And I remember kind of literally sometimes on my knees praying, going, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And this is what I'm supposed to do. The high degree of sensitivity, the intuition, my instincts, my experience, everything up that had all my various roles, my jobs, everything has been preparing me, or had been preparing me for this particular role. And of course, there was fear and there was doubt. Could I do it? Could I make a difference? What would happen to my sense of self by putting myself out there? Because that was not something that I had any aspirations to do. So as we connect to our heightened sense of self, that really kind of, as I say, our spiritual self, because it's not something that's really talked about much in mainstream. You have the different kind of people and the different levels, and they don't often sort of come together. And it kind of saddens me when I don't hear doctors or the medical field talking about, they just talk physical. They don't talk about the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And we are spiritual beings in a human body. So if dis-ease and illness and sickness is showing up in the body, it's because there's disalignment. There's ill health is showing up because there's ill alignment going on in someone's life. In fact, another friend of a friend messaged through and sharing all sorts of things that I hadn't spoken to for a while, sharing all sorts of different things that are going wrong in their life right now. And I say going wrong, it's really catastrophic what is happening to them. But equally, I feel that I have this knowing, not an arrogant knowing, but just a knowing that this is all happening to shake them out of their stupor, shake them out of what is their sleepwalking through their life, because they are ready for a greater purpose, for the role that they should be fulfilling up ahead. And that's very much for what my belief is about endometriosis. Endometriosis, cysts, fibroids, adenomyosis, these are all highly estrogen dominant conditions that are in the pelvis region, which has, if you think back to that little girl who's been told to sit quiet and be quiet, and don't you dare lose your temper at me, and you're supposed to work hard, care for everybody, but don't you dare care about yourself. That is all shoved down, deep down into the body. And this is why the body ends up making the signs and symptoms that it does to get your attention. And this can be quite a hard concept to get your head around, because we're all brought up very much left brain. If you look at the education systems in most places around the world, it's focused in preschool, nursery, and in the first couple of years in primary school, of all kind of right brain education and learning through painting and drawing and creativity. And then that is pretty much, hammered out from maybe primary 3 upwards, maybe even just slightly earlier, where it's all left brain. So when we're on this journey, and it is a journey, we're now trying to kind of engage and comprehend our left brain training, because we've been trained to be who we are up until this point, to step into, to integrate with our right brain, which has got our creativity and our vision and our purpose and our instincts, that other sense of knowing. And it can be a real challenge. It can be a real challenge because we've been brought up by these people who said, don't daydream and be sensible and be responsible, all those different messages that we got. And how many adults do you know go and play? Now, there are no children that have to be taught how to play. They just play. They have wonderful imaginations. They're very creative. That is just what children do. You don't have to teach that. You might encourage it as a parent. You might get different toys and things, but that is not something you have to teach. But yet that is what is taught, is how that is taught out of us through our education system. So by the time we're adults and there's things showing up in your body, it is a direct reflection to kind of what is being disowned inside. That sense of spiritual being, that spiritual self that you were born with is deep in hiding, deep down in your body. And I believe for women with endometriosis, it's that sense of they are scared subconsciously to connect with who they are because it was so shamed upon or put down upon or not appreciated. I don't know how many times I was told, you're just too sensitive, Wendy, stop being so sensitive. Or I was just having a laugh, and why can't you take a joke? And all the different things that were said to me that were cruel and unkind and hurtful and harmful. So there are so many things that were, I say so many things, there are specific elements that we look at as part of the Laidlaw protocols. There's the 3 daily basics and the 5 Ps. Equally are all as important as each other because they provide the framework, the deep foundations. So these new foundations that you're building, it's been a fantastic week. There's been another group of women, having amazing results with their health and putting the condition in remission. And it's just, it just gives me goosebumps. It's such a joy to hear the continued growth, and really this EndoBoss movement of women is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, and I know my role, my mission is to spread this out to governments around the world, to educational systems, get the proper messaging into schools for girls and for young women, and also change the medical training that's going on because it's very antiquated. But of course, all of that is daunting, is scary. But I know now that I am truly connected to who I am at my core. That is what I'm supposed to do. And I see the role of the woman coming through is their loss of sense of self. And I say loss, invariably, many women have never had it, or rather, I'll rephrase it. They were born with it, but it was put into hiding for protection. It's like a precious jewel that was put, it's like the crown jewels of Great Britain were put in the tower for protection, and that's pretty much what your sense of self and the essence of you had to happen for protection. And of course, I further encourage that protection, but to allow those jewels to come out to be on display, but behind a display cabinet, like this level of protection that you need, that you must have. Because I think what some women make the mistake of doing is they recognize there's some parts of them that need to be re-educated, relearn how to be in the world, and then they fully expose themselves only to be wounded and hurt. It's a very toxic world out there. There's a lot of nasty people. That is just a fact. If you go to a jungle, there's toxic species and there's nice species. It's the same here in our human jungle. But if you don't have adequate protection, realistic protection, boundaries, and various other elements that you need, like, safe people, safe groups of people, then you were going to expose yourself, and then you're going to push yourself back down into hiding again. And this is where it's very, very important to be not delusional about what life is like, be realistic about other people, because obviously there's lots of people out there in the world that have their own agendas and things, and they're allowed to have their own agendas, but equally not at the expense of us. And that's the difference as we move forward on this journey. So there were some questions came in. Can you advise on overcoming the persisting anxiety and finding trust in God, higher power? Every time I push over my boundaries or don't sleep well, I have this overwhelming panic anxiety. Well, I mean, my view of anxiety is a younger part. There I just said earlier about the ages between maybe 5, 8, maybe 9, 10, maybe between say 5 and 10. Before the age of 2, there was no language. From the age of 2, roughly, just maybe 3, 4, 5, you're starting to kind of put words to meanings. And invariably at that point, there aren't the feeling states, emotional understanding to the feeling states at that particular point. So anxiety, my understanding with working with so many women now, is anxiety is a younger part. It's pre-verbal. It may have some language, but it doesn't quite know how to make sense of something. So something has activated that feeling. It's just an emotion. And normally there's a sensation happens prior to that feeling. And what we're trying to do on the journey is keep expanding our awareness and our awakeness to what's happening around us. And it can feel, I know some people said, oh, but it's so tiring and it's so exhausting. I said, yeah, but it's also incredibly liberating, isn't it? How liberating it is to have this knowledge now. You could, and somebody said to me, I wonder if it'd be easier just to go back to not being aware. And I'm like, no, never on your Nelly. Ultimately, you have this knowledge now, and you'll once you start to wake up to how the world really is, you don't want to. That's what made you ill and sick before. But learning to be comfortable with, and note I say, learning to become comfortable with anxiety, it's a small part of you, tiny little part of you, a vulnerable part of you that's saying, sorry, can you just stop and sit and explain something to me? Can we just take some time here? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is finding trust in ourselves first, before we look to having trust in anything else externally. This is what I said right at the very beginning. We tend to start this journey looking externally for the answers. And of course, it's that sacred sense of self internally that we're connecting to. And of course, it's kind of almost feels an oxymoron, because we're like, we don't want to be dependent on anything or anyone, which is fine, but we have to become connected and dependent on ourselves. And that is the journey, and that is the biggest challenge. So for me, if there's any anxiety, the worst thing you can do is ignoring it. The best thing you can do is by grabbing your pen and paper and wrapping yourself in a furry blanket, or give yourself something that's comforting and soothing, and literally ask a question, like, or write out what the feeling states are. And if you're not sleeping well, then make sure to get up and write. Don't toss and turn in bed, because that's, once something's been activated, it's almost like that little boy I was saying. He's been ignored, but he's persistent. He's going, but dad, why? So if something's been activated, it's really important to connect to that part, listen to it. And again, I get that there'll be a part of you goes, oh, I don't have time, I really don't want to do it, it's exhausting, but do it anyway, because that is the younger part of you that felt neglected and ignored, that now needs your time and attention. You're saying, I'm making myself too responsible for things I cannot influence. I'm an empath. I see the suffering around me and I want to help save everyone, while it is God in charge and not me. Where is the boundary between what I'm responsible for and where I just have to sit and watch and let God do his work, even if I don't like it? I tend to argue with him, and that leads to my anxiety pattern. I think that, as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, what a beautiful heart that you have, that you want to help so many people. It's natural at this point of the journey. I see this point of the journey because it's a journey, is to kind of, you wake up and you go, oh my goodness, look at all this sadness and look at all that's going on around about me. You've always known, because you were born with a high degree of sensitivity, but equally you tried to fight that sensitivity in the past. You tried to push it away because it was almost overwhelming and overbearing at times. And I think what we do is we just, again, we have to come inward to recognize, is this some subconscious need of me to go and save the world? Do you remember me saying, I was bedridden, chronically bedridden, high levels of pain, and I wanted to save the world, but I couldn't save myself. So this is where it's natural to kind of, argue with God, question these things, but why? What's happening? And this is where, through the journaling and the meditation, the answers will come to you. But ultimately, what I see is the complete answer is that journey to self, journey back to that sacred part of yourself. And it is a journey. It's not a quick fix overnight thing that you can say, right, that's me connected to self now, because you're having to deal with old beliefs, which are kind of like an old computer. If you turn an old computer on nowadays, how many updates would you need to have to get it working operational? And that's what we're doing with we're kind of upgrading our thinking and our beliefs and our feelings and our emotions. But the reason that we is because, we feel other people's pain and everything, and we have to learn what is within our control. And again, that comes back to listening to ourselves, listening to the guidance that we receive. Like, realistically, we know we're powerless over other people, places, and things, but you can help, what I call the AIEIE, increase someone's awareness. The I is for give them information, give them education. The other I is inspire them. You be the inspiration, and then that will lead people to their own awakening, and that ultimately leads to empowerment. But it's recognizing we can't force, we can't cajole, we can't scream at someone to do something they don't want to do. We are literally powerless. And when we see so many injustices in the world, of course, that is upsetting and distressing beyond belief. When I first recognized, that I had something, that I put this incurable condition into remission, that I cured the incurable, I went and phoned lots of different charities and medical associations, and even the House of Parliament down in London, the health minister. I tried to reach out, but they weren't interested. They were just not interested. I always remember as well, Wim Hof, who's a phenomenal breathing teacher. And again, he jokes that he thought he was going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for recognizing the power of just all these, breathing exercises and running a marathon in the North Pole. Again, no one was listening to him. So we have to use what we've been given, or our purpose, and we have to channel that, make sure that we are surrounded by people that truly believe in us, because it's challenging and it's tough when we recognize that there's all this sadness and misery and injustice in the world, but we can't afford to have ourselves spread too thin, bouncing around everywhere. I learned on my journey that I had to keep really focused, get a good gatekeepers, people around about me that truly believe me, great coaches, but also, recognize how self-care was so important, had to put other measures in place to protect myself, so that I could continue to do the work that I'm destined to do, that I believe that is my gift. And everybody has their own gift, but you need to have the right environment for allowing that gift to keep growing. So it's recognizing that we're powerless over other people, places, and things. We are. But what we are is all powerful within ourselves. And that's the challenge. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, the challenge is coming back into yourself, not in an egotistical way, not thinking that we're, that we've got this sorted, because once we come onto this pathway, we learn, the more we learn, the less we know. And then what we do is we inspire others to make the changes. And that by itself, because the anxiety is probably cropping up because you're feeling this internal pressure. And of course, that's where the frustration and things can come up as well. You're saying, any advice on how to recognize people who are lying to me or trying to betray me? When they play it really well, I don't recognize it and fall for their tricks, demands, and prices, talking about beggars and merchants. Again, I think you just have to trust that will come in time. Sometimes people are really, really good at masking and hiding their true intentions. This is where we've only got our own instincts to go by. And sometimes people will get one over on us. This is where the internal compassion and kindness is really important. Making sure to be super, super kind to yourself if and when these things happen, and go, that's a bit annoying. I didn't see that coming, but next time nobody will catch you out in that way again. But just trust in your instincts, and know that, we're human after all, and that we don't always get it right. And people don't always reveal themselves fully until they reveal themselves, and know that, we are around in a human jungle where there's lots of toxic people, got different agendas, and their different focus in life, and it's different from ours. They're allowed to go and do their thing, as we're allowed to do our thing, what you'll learn is more protective ways of how to protect yourself. But if you do fall foul to someone, the most important thing is to go, right, that was a lesson. What did I learn from that? And make sure not to do it again. But keep up the awesome work. You are doing so well. And keep remembering to journal, meditate, power shakes. Notice that when those 3 daily basics start to wane or you feel resistance, that's when you're about to have another level of growth. These are very, very important key indicators for you. So make sure that you keep doing that. And we will speak next week. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number 1. The world needs a healthy you.